All right, so we're recording now. All right, so what's today? January 23rd already. Wasn't
I
it
know.
yesterday, New Year's Day?
Yeah, it
All of a
was.
sudden, now it's the
Yeah, I'm still
23rd.
hungover.
Ray, behave. All right, so thanks for joining, everyone. We're going to go over ah, it's the example of pleadings and how you can understand how this stuff it works and get somewhere, okay? Use your tax dollars, okay, to get somewhere.
Mhm.
And so I'll give you an example, a few examples, but before we get in there, so a lot of this material, okay, now I keep adding more material, more videos, more instruction. Okay, that's at aceofcoins.club. So there's a video series there that you can, there's groups of them. You can just look and see which pertains to what you want to do. I talk about taxes. I talk about, managing property rights, risk management. I use limited liability companies for that. There's many tutorials, okay, on many examples on the aceofcoins.club. Aceofcoins.com, of course, you can set up a conference with me. I'm not selling LLCs, I'm just doing consulting. And sometimes most of the time I use LLCs to get a client started in the right direction. So sometimes I coach people on how to set up cash flow. Sometimes I coach people on how to deal with a state tax issue. So there's all that going on, and I do consultations for that. And then, so what I'm doing now is I do these Thursday evening calls, but I want to try to help people understand some basic things without them having to reinvent the wheel or suffer you know, the loss or whatever. So the example I want to give you is we're going to talk about pleadings, okay? And the understanding is that pleadings determine what the court's allowed to do. So a pleading is a complaint. It's when you go to the court and you ask for something, okay? And yeah, it's ecclesiastical, right? But so what? Let's just use it. It's what we have, okay? That prevents us from getting into fist fights, hopefully, or gunfights at high noon, right? We don't have to do that anymore. Okay, we can have words. Okay, we have to kind of tolerate that and kind of appreciate it. So we have a court system where the judge, that office of the judge is created by statute. So your legislature creates that function. So the example I'm going to give this evening is going to be, you have the trial court in your state where it's been divided. There's a division known as the family court, and the family court, for the most part, its purpose is to declare the dissolution of a marriage. Okay. Now, in some cases where there's evidence of abuse, neglect, or imminent harm, then the court can step in and actually use the police power and hopefully protect somebody, right? Prevent that from happening or cure that from going forward. That is the whole idea. We want that in our society, but here's what's happening. The family court is being used to liquidate people. And so I'm just going to speak stereotypically. I'm just going to say that 80% of the time in the family court, it's where the wife leaves, she leaves the household, abandons her benefits, and then without terms, and then goes back to the court, files for divorce, and asks the court to come in there and impose new terms. Okay, because some lawyer sold her on the idea that she could do that. So we're going to get into that. So don't think that if you're not married, okay, that you didn't get a marriage license. Don't think that you can't find yourself in family court, okay? I'm even going to say that you can find yourself in family court even if you don't live in the same household with the other person. This is how bad this is. So what's happening is the court system is taking jurisdiction based upon residency, not on a marriage license or something like that. It's residency within a particular county. And there's actually statutes that allow the court to reach out into another county when the venue is different. Venue meaning that the location, that you're in a different county, okay, two different places of residency, okay? So you can find yourself in this situation. So I want to go over how the pleadings work. And I'll start with the example of, this is a great example. I had an IRS case. It was actually two IRS cases. So the IRS transfers a claim over to the Department of Justice, and the DOJ, as we call it, proceeds to go against the person. So for example, the one I'm going to talk about is, this is a few years ago, my client, high net worth client, was audited, and the IRS didn't like how I coached the client and how I instructed the client on how to answer the IRS's questions. And so it ended up in court, and I saw this coming, so I had the client make a transcript of the audit. So we actually had a court reporter at the audit, and she took the transcript, and so I knew that what would happen is that the the IRS would lie and say that my client used the Fifth Amendment, okay, which I instructed my client not to do. So anyways, it goes to the federal court, and the the IRS or the Department of Justice told the judge that, this lie about the person used the Fifth Amendment and didn't answer the questions and wants an order compelling him to answer the questions under penalty of contempt. And so we produced the transcript and asked for dismissal and said, you're lying. And so the DOJ got embarrassed and dismissed the case, right? That was real easy. So then that wasn't the end of it. So they took the same set of facts and brought a new case. And this time the DOJ alleged a debt. It was like $600,000. Now in the pleading, there was no other way to do this. So in the pleading, the complaint that was filed by the DOJ of the United States, that there was this regular allegation of assessment. There was a tax assessment. So you have to follow the rules. But what we did is we would go off the pleading. The pleading says, remember, the allegations have to be proven, right? So if the allegations are based upon a tax assessment that established a debt, you're entitled to see it. So we asked to see it. And of course, there isn't one. There was never an assessment. So what we were able to do was, in that case, it doesn't always work, but in that case, we were able to move into what's called a dispository hearing to try to get the case thrown out. And we asked for summary judgment because they the DOJ failed to produce the record of assessment for what was alleged in the complaint. So we had complete basis to ask for that because it was alleged word for word. And we said, okay, we want that. And so the DOJ couldn't produce it and didn't want to admit that there wasn't such a thing. And that's required by law, as a matter of fact. So the DOJ again dismissed the case with prejudice. That was the end of that. So it's so powerful. We didn't have to talk about the merits of a tax issue. All we had to talk about was what was in the pleading. You said that this number, this dollar amount that you claim is owed was assessed, a tax assessment, and we have a right to see it. So let's see it. And that we called their bluff, and that was the end of the game. Sometimes they come up with other false records and it takes longer to deal with that, but it just worked out that way. So when it comes to a family court situation, here's what typically happens. The divorce petition is filed. It's an application for the declaration of the dissolution of a marriage. And so what's being requested of the court is what's called declaratory relief. It's a very simple thing. It's not about splitting up assets and selling houses and things of that nature. It's not about necessarily child custody, although it could be. Now, the child custody and the alimony, or the money that's being allocated for the use of the family or for the benefit of the family, that's already taking place. So there's already money being paid for these purposes, right? It's not like suddenly we need an alimony payment. Well, that money's already been allocated a certain way. So when you hear the
and
word
you're talking
alimony,
about like what people have been doing all along in their marriage.
yeah. Yeah, everything they've been doing, okay, is where the money's moving around, okay? And when we hear the word alimony, we're hearing how the court has ordered someone to pay money to the other spouse, okay? Well, those benefits have already been allocated to the other spouse. For example, in a stereotypical example, the wife left, right? So she's already been receiving these benefits, but she abandoned them without terms. And now she's relying upon the court to reestablish some different set of terms, okay? And that doesn't necessarily cure anything. In fact, it doesn't even consider what was already being done. So one of the first duties that the court has in any proceeding almost is, especially in family court, is to preserve the status quo. That is actually a legal duty that the court has, to preserve the status quo, what was already happening, okay? How can the court do that if it's not alleged, right? In the pleading, right? You got to start there. So if the pleading is saying declaratory relief, right? The pleading is saying dissolution of marriage and nothing else. There's no allegation of abuse, neglect, or imminent harm. There's no allegation of debt. Well, if there's no allegation of debt, how can we talk about alimony? Where'd that come from? Payments were already made. Money was already allocated. Property was already allocated for the benefit of the family, the members of the family, and one of them left without terms. So there was an abandonment of property, and now that person's coming back to the court to impose new terms. Well, how's that? How can the court be used to change a contract? How can the court be used to change an arrangement, a financial arrangement, okay? Cannot. So this is what's happening. So in a petition for declaratory relief where it's seeking dissolution of marriage, there's no, or can be no consideration for a debt, because first of all, you can't have a debt between husband and wife. It's one person.
Right.
So how is there an adverse situation? They're not adversarial parties, okay?
Yeah.
So you can't, you have to start with that. But let's just say there's an allegation of debt. Okay, fine. But there has to be some substance behind that, but there's not. So
Mhm.
what happens is the court says, well, the statute gives me jurisdiction. All right, well, when does a statute create a debt? When can a court create a debt? Can't do it. Now, I've seen cases where the judge says you have to sign this promissory note so that we can liquidate you, essentially, is what they're doing. But this is not required, okay? No one can make you incur a debt obligation or actually suffer a financial hardship. So you have to look at the pleading. So this is the interesting thing. So if you ever wanted to look at one, you can just go to your courthouse and go into family court and just pull a pleading that was just filed like a week ago, okay? And go see what I'm talking about. There's not going to be, in most cases, there's not going to be allegations of abuse, neglect, or imminent harm. There's not going to be allegations of debt, and there's not going to be allegations that describe the status quo.
Mhm.
So the judge is divested of his ability or duty to change the status quo.
Mhm.
And what's most important, though, is even if there's allegations about the status quo, which there could be, to change them, there would have to be a reason to change them. There would have to be some allegation, first of all, of abuse, neglect, or imminent harm that changing the status quo would cure or prevent.
Mhm.
Those have to come together. Who writes a pleading that way? Nobody does. They're all checkbox form. Go check it out. They're all check boxes. Lawyers don't even think what a pleading is. They're just checking boxes.
Yeah.
What do you want? What do you want? What do you want?
And also they're doing some screwy things, like they're using the term marital community or marital assets, and they're trying to say that that is essentially a party in the case, right?
That's a good point. So if we're talking about marital community, marital estate, marital property, where is that in the pleading? Because it might be a person, right? Or it might be collateral. Is the marital estate collateral in some debt obligation? Well, there's no allegation of debt obligation, right?
Right.
Well, then how can we talk about the marital community when it's not even been described in the pleading?
Right.
How
And
can
we've
we
been
talk?
so programmed, don't you think,
Right.
John, to think
They
that
think
like
it's
we're just,
okay.
yeah, we
So,
agree
and
with it.
what if the marital community is collateral on some debt obligation? Or what if it needs to be served process?
Hmm.
Shouldn't the marital community be a party to the case?
Hmm.
If it should be a party, right? Shouldn't it be a defendant?
Hmm.
If you want what's in the marital community, right? But
Hmm.
they don't do that. They just start talking about it.
No, they just say, like, you guys have a house and the house should be split half in half.
And that's
How do they
arbitrary.
come up with that?
It's arbitrary and it fails to consider the status quo. It fails to consider the intelligence that went into deciding how the family money was allocated, how the property was allocated, how the resources were allocated to provide the comforts and conveniences and the safety for all the members of the family.
Right.
Your court can't do that until it's given the correct information, and also the way in which it would cure some other problem like abuse, neglect, or imminent harm.
Right. And also the court fails to realize that that house that they're trying to sell and kick everybody out of would actually be the home for some of the, people in the family and probably some of the children, at least part of the time. And they're
Well, in
yanking
many
that away
cases,
from the
it creates a
family.
hardship. In
It
many cases,
does.
it does create a hardship.
It literally
It
does.
cares,
Yeah.
right? So what's going on is the court has an interest, okay? It's an undisclosed
Mm.
conflict of interest. So the court is creating a record based upon false facts, okay? There is no underlying debt, but yet the court's going to order the payment of money or the reallocation of money and property. Well,
Mm-hmm.
the reason why it's doing that is because the case file itself, you have to think of it like a ledger, okay? So if the case file has orders for the payment of money, the case file has value. And so this includes custody, by the way, because child custody involves property rights. Now, you and I don't think of that in terms of dollars, but the court does. And so those property rights, when they're ordered by the court to be changed in some way, or money is ordered to be paid, that creates value in the record, which the state then is able to use to apply to the United States government for matching funds. And that's what's really going on, is your family
Yes.
court is being used to enrich your state government
Hmm.
and making false claims for this money.
And it also explains why sometimes they give the child to the really, if you're just looking at it from the outside, more times to the wrong parent. because the other parent has more money.
That's what happens.
Yeah, and so they
It's the
want, yeah,
parent that has the most income typically, or
that
the
will get the
is the
most,
most stable, right?
yeah,
Like
that
for
will get
example, if one of the
reamed.
parents, let's say it's most professional, or it's the professional who's in the profession that he got into because he went to school for it, that's typically the most stable income. And so that's going to be, that person's going to get penalized more.
Mhm.
That's typically what happens because it's more reliable, just like a loan situation. It's imagine whatever the court does, it's being underwritten. Now think about, imagine what happens. You got to think, who is behind this? I think it's the function of the banking system, or maybe it's a function or a combination of business interests in your community. Think about it
Mhm.
like this. If you're running, let's say you maybe own a dozen strip malls, right? And not that everybody wants to own a strip mall, but what happens if the residential real estate pricing goes up and you have more equity in your property and you get the bright idea that you're going to buy a strip mall and maybe you become a competitor with someone who's been there for a generation or so, right? Well, if you're already there and you have several $1 million in assets in that community, wouldn't you want to prevent people from having the accumulation of wealth to come in and compete with you? Even if he's not going to do that, it makes sense to have a scheme in place that would liquidate people that could use their home equity, for example, to come into some other investments that might compete with you. But the easier way to look at this is what happens in a situation where, let's say you got 20 years left in your mortgage and you have to
Yeah.
refinance it, or
Mhm.
you pay it off because the judge ordered you to sell your house, right? Or
And
refinance.
suddenly your house gets sold for less than it's worth and it's snapped up by somebody else.
Well, there's that, but
And
also
who are those people?
what happens to the interest rate on your note? The face value of your interest rate. You think the face value of your note is what the bank cares about?
No.
No, the bank has a discount rate and they've already sold your note anyways.
Yeah.
So what they're doing is when you pay off a mortgage early, no matter how it's done, if the face value is 6%, and I'm just going to make up a number, the bank is probably going to make 80% on what's known as an internal rate of return. That's how the bank gets rich, not because of the 6%. They could care less about the 6%. So who's behind this legislation? Who's behind, if you
Mhm.
go look in your state statutes, okay, for family court, and go look and compare that with a reorganization plan and the rules for your Chapter 13 filing in federal court, and you're going to get angry because you're looking at the statutes for a receivership.
Mm.
Chapter 13 is a receivership, and so is family court. They're very
Mhm.
similar. If you want to look at a great example, if you look at the receivership rules for Texas, it's a fantastic example. Texas has one of the best sets of rules for receivership, and there's nothing wrong with receivership. The problem is using receivership when you're not telling people this, and it's an
Yeah.
involuntary secret receivership when you should be dealing with the benefit of the family. And what you're really
Right.
doing is liquidating the family.
Right.
This
Right.
is wrong. But
Hey,
anyways, the
John, can I
remedy
tell you
is the
something?
pleading. Yes.
Can I tell you one thing that I learned recently from one of our clients?
Yeah.
Uh, he said that his ex-wife actually told him that the lawyer that she had hired to divorce him and all that
Yeah.
told her, "You really need to make some allegations of rape and
Yes,
attachment."
that's what they do. Right.
Like
So,
he said that, and
right.
the wife was so shocked by that, she literally told her, soon to be ex-husband, "Can you believe she told me that? And I didn't do it because I'm not trying to mess you around, but I want you to pay for this, this,
Well,
this."
that person should be
How's that?
reported to the
But I
bar.
mean,
I
isn't
mean,
that insane?
but this is what they do because it does give you leverage.
Yeah, because there's no standing. I mean, there's no
Yeah.
abuse or neglect, so there's no standing. I mean, no cause of action.
Well, let's say
So
that
they make
someone
it
wants to
up.
make
They
those
pretend that
allegations.
there is.
I've had clients where they start off with these allegations, right? And we know they're false. So remember, it has to start with the allegations and the pleading because that gives the court a duty to get involved, right?
Mhm.
The first duty of the court is to have an evidentiary hearing, but he's not going to do it. He's going to go, the judge or he or she's going to go off of with the naked allegation. So what you need to do is make sure that you get an evidentiary hearing and cross-examine that person that's made those claims. And you will be able to get past all that if it's
Yeah.
false. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was just like
That's
a
kind
real
of
eye
interesting.
opener when he said
Mhm.
that that was like her counsel session, like when she's just signing the client up. By the
Yeah,
way,
that's pretty
this is
bad.
what you should do.
That person should be disbarred. That is wrong. Making false representations to the court. You see what kind of racket it is. It's such a bad racket that some of these lawyers, they understand that and they don't care anymore.
Mhm.
To them, it's just a game. I've seen so many cases where the lawyers, when I look at the record, like it's 2-year divorce, right? Someone comes to me and says, I need to get out of this mess. And I look at the record, I'm like, okay, well, they're just playing volleyball with your money. I see right here, this lawyer, they're tacitly cooperating with each other. They don't talk about this, but they know how the game works. So this lawyer files motions he doesn't need to file, and the
Mhm.
other lawyer argues against them, doesn't need to do that, but it costs money. They
Mhm.
just bill you for it.
And takes time and all that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so
It,
many things they don't need to do.
it's a revenue base for the legal industry. In fact,
Yeah.
the family court, it's increased over the years, John, because now when somebody gets a divorce, they have to go through counseling. They have to they have to do all kinds of stuff that didn't
It's a
exist
racket. The whole
before.
thing all the way around is a racket.
Yeah.
Guardian ad litem, do the parenting plan, take these
Yeah.
classes. All it's just like,
Right.
oh my
Yeah.
God, my.
And so the guardian ad litem, there are grounds for that where there is evidence of abuse, neglect, or imminent harm. You
Yeah,
can't just
I'm
put a
talking
guardian
about when there's
ad
not.
litem,
Yeah.
and that's what they do. They take your children away with a guardian ad litem, and then there's no grounds for it. But then they don't give you access to the court when you're trying to challenge it. So you have to understand this is what's going on. So know that what I'm talking about tonight is the pleading tells you what the court's legal duty is. The statutes created the subject matter jurisdiction, let's call it. The court has subject matter jurisdiction, no problem. But the way in which it operates is limited by what's alleged in the pleading. Now,
Mhm.
if there's false allegations in the pleading, you can break through that if you're going to do discovery properly. So you can have an evidentiary hearing, you can start with the deposition. So if the petitioner makes false allegations, you simply set up a deposition. You see how fast they would retract it or amend the pleading, okay? Because they know it's coming. So, but yeah, this is so important. And once you understand this, you have to think about things like, for example, you have to think of very basic concepts. Can the court be used to change a contract?
No,
Can the judge force you into or compel you to enter into a contract under some sort of duress situation,
no,
threats of jail? Of course not. And even if you did so, that whatever you did is not binding
right.
anyways. And so you have to object and call the judge on it and say, first of all, if you had the authority to do this thing, you wouldn't have to tell me that I'd go to jail if I don't do it. You could have
Mhm.
just done it. So obviously you don't have the authority. Just like if the judge says you have to sell your house and you say, no. And he says, all right, well, if you don't sell your house, I'm going to find you in contempt. Well, then obviously you don't have the authority because you have to threaten me with contempt. So if you have to threaten me with contempt, selling my house means I have to enter into a series of agreements, namely a listing agreement and all these things. So those agreements wouldn't be valid because you just threatened me with jail for not doing them. So even if I did them, they're not valid. So guess what? I'm not going to do them. So it puts the judge in, in a situation where he has to commit. Okay, go ahead, commit, do it. I'm not going to participate in my own liquidation.
Right.
So
That was just asking if you're aware of Title IV deconnection. That's exactly what we're talking about.
yeah, so like we talked about a month ago, I think, where we get into, this matching funds scheme. If you guys want to check it
Yeah.
out, go look in the Social Security Act. You can Google this. Social Security Act. What is that, 1939 or something, 1934? Social Security Act under Titles 4D, as in David, and 4E. They use Roman numerals, so 4E, like Edward.
Like,
Look at
yeah.
that. All right.
IV for, yeah.
D, IV, E. So yeah, Titles 4D and 4E of the Social Security Act. Okay, if you go look that, you might get angry. You should be angry. Now, we should just cut this off. I mean, really, that should be repealed.
Yeah.
That would get rid of family courts right there. I mean, we need them, but if the courts were used for the proper purpose, we could handle probably
Right.
99% of divorces in trial court.
Like, just in civil court. Right, right.
Yeah.
A
Why do you
separate
think
entity that's turned into a monster.
if y'all ever had to pay a traffic fine, right? And you have to sit there and wait till your case is called and you listen to all the different other cases. I've done that before. Listen to all the other cases. You realize that it's a pretty good racket. And yeah, there needs to be a division of the trial court to handle just traffic court cases because it's such a racket. They're just raking in all this money, so many thousands of dollars an hour from people. You got to have a separate court. Well, what does that tell you about family court? It
Mhm.
shouldn't be like that, right? It's almost a little bit more, family court is a little bit more a bigger function than the county recorder's office, because the judge may have to get involved in some cases. Like he might have to say something like, really, you guys want to get a divorce? Oh, that's too bad. Okay, sure, you sure? Okay, I'll go ahead and issue the declaration. That's what it's for. But anyways, don't be liquidated. What's this one or something? Yes,
Oh,
that's why I explained about divorcing the state, because so what we're talking about is you're already in that situation. Okay, what I like to try to do is a post-nuptial agreement. And there's some terms in there that would divest the court on the face of the agreement of getting involved. So that way it's not even a drama you have to get involved with, okay? You can do this and then work it out. You should anyways. Think about like this, a family, even if it's just husband and wife, it's a private membership association. It's a private, intimate relationship. No one has the right to get involved unless there's some, abuse going on.
so Batman put some notes in the chat that were
Yeah.
really interesting. He just says, for example, Texas gets 66 cents for every dollar of child support paid into the treasury. And then he also says that in most states, the judicial retirement fund is funded from this revenue.
Wow. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So if you want the racket to continue and the judges to be behind it, pay them.
And John, you told me, I had no idea. You told me that when judges retire, they retire, and if that judge dies, the wife or spouse
The Fed judges.
gets the pension to
Yeah, these are the district court judges.
continues to get their salary.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
it's a big deal. I mean, because the 4E funds the attorney general in every state. Remember we put that up a while back? It's
Yeah.
funding the AG office.
Yeah. Yeah. So
And
anyways, this is,
it was passed by Congress.
yeah. Yeah. So this is, I mean, down the road, something to look at, but you have a remedy here if you understand how to look at the pleading and just think to yourself, what, like, for example, when the judge orders you to testify about your assets, post-judgment discovery, and then you tell him that you don't want to testify about your assets, and then he says, if you don't, I'm going to put you in jail, and you say, okay, I'll testify, and everything I tell you is going to be a big fat lie. Because what happens then is it transfers the liability back onto the judge because he ordered you to do something under threat of incarceration. And so he uses official position to obtain your testimony. So if you tell him you're going to get false testimony and then you do, that's perjury, right? Lying under oath. Judge is then liable for that perjury.
And that's called suborning of perjury.
Right. That's the judge suborning your testimony, suborning your testimony. So that's why you inform the judge, okay, if you tell me I'm going to go to jail if I don't testify, then I will swear in and testify, and everything I say henceforth will be a big fat lie. And let him think about that one. Because he knows what that is. He knows what subordination of perjury is. So
this claim cases that we're going to try to work on, you're working on.
Yeah, the False Claims Act, right? So we already have a pleading. We're about ready to file one. Because it's the False Claims Act, it's federal. And because you have a tort against the judge, I don't believe you have so much of a remedy in the appeals court. Maybe we do if we have the right appeal, but I think the way to proceed is you make a tort claim against the county, the state, and possibly the judge, okay? Possibly the court. So you have possibly 4 defendants. But in that claim, you have a count for the False Claims Act. Because you have a count for the False Claims Act, you can file it in the U.S. District Court. So now what you're going to do is avoid the buddy system
in the family court. Yeah, which is terrible.
Right, because we've even had one case where they had to bring in a judge from another county to
and it still didn't work because the other judge reached over into the case. It was insane.
Yeah, so
you can't appeal because they're buddies. Yeah.
We had to add that to solve the problem, I think, by just going to the federal court, and we can do that under the rules under Title 28. I forget the actual citation, but we can get into the U.S. District Court on all these claims. So, but you got to waive their immunity. So that's an important thing. So in the beginning, what we try to do is if we don't have postnuptial that we can use, we look at the pleadings, and then we file what's called a dispository motion. I like to do a motion to dismiss, right? Or you can ask for judgment on the pleadings. Okay,
Mhm.
depends on the situation. And these are known as dispository motions, and they don't like to hear those because they've got this train running, right?
You're gonna stop the
You're gonna
train.
stop the train. They don't want to stop. They want to
The
get your stuff.
gravy train, yeah.
Yeah. So like in the one recent one we're working on, they made up this gimmick about you didn't give proper notice for the hearing, so we can't talk about it right now. And they're trying to restage the scheduling of the motion to dismiss so they can get other matters and make it hard for the person we're helping to get his motion heard first. And it should be heard first because it's a motion to dispose of the case. Those are supposed to be heard first. So we like to start out that way, even if you already answer the petition, because if you answer it, you get more billable hours.
Mm-hmm.
File a motion to dismiss like I would do. Well,
Mm-hmm.
what fun is that? How many billable hours can I get from that? 3? But if I
Right.
answer the complaint, I could probably get 300.
And they're also using all the little motions, the little side motions to say, I want you to behave this way, and I want all these fees. I want attorney fees. So like they're also jacking up attorney fees through the
They do
motions.
that. It's just a racket. So anyways, where we have a path to follow is looking at the pleading because that limits the duty of the court. We start with that. What is the legal duty of the court? It's what was asked of the court.
Mm-hmm.
And if it wasn't asked of the court, we know this is acting outside the pleading. Okay. This is law school 101. When you start talking language like this, they understand that you know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an appealable, reversible, abuse of discretion issue, meaning that if I can appeal something based upon abuse of discretion, the appeals court looks at that in the entire case. The appeals court doesn't look at it from that one little page. The appeals court is going to look at it in what's called de novo review. That means from the beginning. They don't like that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the situation they're going to create if you just look at the pleading.
Yeah. Which would be nice because, frankly, the family court judges or commissioners or whoever, they don't even seem to read the pleadings. They don't seem to read them. It really feels like they don't know what's going on. When I talk to clients about like what was said and what happened in the situation, they're like, the guy didn't know. He's asking me questions. He doesn't know.
Right. They're not used to these questions. They don't think about it like this. Since when can courts change arrangements? Since when can courts violate the status quo without even knowing what it is to start with?
Right.
See, the lawyers never think about this. All they're looking at doing is a checkbox form.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you bring up this, they don't want to take your case then.
Right.
That's how you get rid of the lawyer, by the way. You
Yeah.
start asking real questions like that.
And just to be clear, when you say what is the status quo, you literally mean what was your family doing? How did you do the chores? Who took
It should
you
be
to
this
school?
simple. I
It's
go
like
into the
all your stuff.
I go into the court and I say to the judge, Your Honor, I understand that your legal duty is to preserve the status quo. Am I incorrect? And of course, he's going to answer that one. Of course. What else can he say? Yes, it is. Where was the status quo alleged in the pleading? Because shouldn't you have to know what the status quo is before you are able
Change
to prove it?
it.
And so what is the judge going to say? Well, he can't go forward. You're disrupting the status quo. I'm just here to tell you. And you don't know what it is, so that's why you're disrupting it. And I'm here to tell you, Judge. Why can I say that? Because the pleading says what you can do. If it doesn't say you can do it, you can't. It's called acting outside the pleading. So anyways, this is very powerful. So, don't feel powerless. If you're in that situation, okay, look at the pleading. That is where that's the game. Okay, that's the game. If you're going to play chess, you play chess. You don't play checkers. That's the game. I've had people come to me where there has been this unfair thing where they allege abuse, and most people don't know what to do, and the lawyer's not going to tell you what to do. The lawyer's going to play ball. He's just going to go along with it. What you need to do is send either a deposition notice, or send interrogatories. I would do a deposition notice, and then I would ask the court for an evidentiary hearing. So I would take the deposition, and then I would have the evidentiary hearing, and I would call the deponent in to be cross-examined based on her testimony or his testimony that he gave at the deposition. That's how it works. Most people don't know that because we follow the rules of civil procedure. So your advantage is learning the rules of civil procedure. And let's just say, here's what I just did recently. I had a contract that was kind of complex. And instead of me just reading it, trying to figure it out like I would normally do, I actually uploaded the contract. I just uploaded the contract and then I asked the AI some questions on the contract. It was so fast. So you could do the same thing. You could actually get the rules of civil procedure on the computer, on the internet, and you can give the citation over to the AI and ask questions about what are the time periods for discovery according to the rules? What types of discovery can I do? Oh my gosh, it's so nice. The AI will just tell you everything. Use these tools.
Well, I definitely want to a copy of this recording to send to
It's going to be really expensive. Yes, of course. All right. So what I'll do is I will publish this, okay? And I'll probably do it tonight or in the morning.
excellent.
All right. You talked me into it.
Yay.
Any questions? Did I talk too fast?
You always talk too fast, but I
All
love
right.
it.
Sorry.
No,
Oh,
it's
okay.
okay. That's okay.
Elaine
So-
has to,
so
you
where
can play
would
him back at
Do you play me in slow
7:05.
motion later? Is
Yes,
that you
yes,
do? Oh
yes.
my goodness. Don't let me hear that. I don't want to hear that. I even hate
No,
myself
you're
listening to me.
you're terrific. You are
All
really.
right. I don't
Um,
want to hear myself in slow motion.
I won't play it for you that way.
All right.
Well, are you going to publish it here or on
I'm
privacy?
gonna put it on YouTube. I mean, I'll give you guys the link anyways.
Okay,
It's gonna be public
great.
because I really want to promote this whole idea. I don't want
This
people
is
to be a
so
victim
important.
on this stuff. It is. It's important, and
So
it's not just
important.
about family court. I mean, I'm talking about that here, but it's like anything else. It's just, I mean, I love it when, okay, so it's not a great situation to be in, but if you get sued for a debt, for example, debt collection, I love
Mhm.
looking at the pleading because their lawyers are so lazy because they get by with just being lazy all the time because most people don't challenge them, right? And I just like looking
They
at the
don't know.
pleading.
People just don't know.
Most of the time I can show that the allegations in the pleading conflict with the exhibits. Now, an exhibit to a pleading is an allegation. Like exhibit A, that's an allegation. So lots of times they'll say something like there's a debt that's owed to the plaintiff, right? And then I look at the exhibit and it shows like a debt collector, but it's not the name of the plaintiff, it's somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
So I argue that the pleadings are insufficient because the allegations conflict with each other. So that divests the court of jurisdiction. It's so simple. And one time I had a judge, he read it and the attorney didn't know what to say. And the judge says, well, that sounds like a really good argument. Do you have a response to that? And the attorney didn't know what to say. And he granted the motion, threw it out of court. So it's really powerful when you look at the pleading, okay, and take it literally and understand what you're looking at and what the court has the ability or the duty to do.
Mm.
All right, well,
With
I'm
all
gonna
this
download
legal
this thing.
plunder. So the next step is that False Claims Act, like, and also using
Yeah, I mean, I'll do a
inspector
class on it if
general.
you guys want. If you got, remember, you can do this without even being in a proceeding. The False Claims Act is for anybody that discovers that federal funds were paid out based upon false reports or requests. So if I'm telling you that this is happening in family court and you want to go pull a record up, I mean, I don't think you even have to pull a pleading up. I think you just make the claim. You can make the claim that your state has been relying upon false public records for the matching funds program under the Social Security Act. And you're talking billions of dollars. I don't know if I'd go after the billions of dollars though. I might go after just a small amount. Like I would pick one case because I think you're going to get by with a claim for $30,000 or $40,000. But once you do, imagine what your precedent you would say. Because you could probably go after tens of billions of dollars. If you're the federal government and you want other people to go collect money that's wrongfully paid out and you want them to do all the work, why would you ever limit them? There's no limit. And what's really nice is you can get a big share of that money. In fact, you can get the whole amount because you can sue for 3 times the amount. And if the DOJ likes it, because they're going to see it, you have to give notice to the DOJ, by the way, when you do this. If the DOJ is tracking your case and likes it, the DOJ might step in and finish it up for you. And you still get paid.
Wow. You did this. You talked about this last week, didn't you? I think
Last month, yes.
last month. Okay.
Mhm.
We're gonna try it.
Amazing.
You guys should try it. The False Claims Act, and I have the pleading if you guys want to. I don't mind sharing it. I'll help you guys. I can't do the work,
Yeah.
and I don't want to. I don't want to take money for that because it's not what I do. But you guys can do it. I was helping somebody the other day. He's in federal court. I'm not gonna tell you the case, but basically when you go into federal court, it's a good idea to look at the rules first, because when you get in there, there's some things that you have to do. There's some like administrative things you have to do. So if you look at the rules first, or if you take the rules and feed it into the AI and say what is needed in the very beginning stages of the case, right? The AI will tell you. And in that case, you can be ready. So that way you'll meet the time limits. It'll be much easier. So.
Are these the rules of civil proceeding in federal court?
Yeah, federal rules of civil procedure, that's the official name. And
Okay.
you also have your local rules. So like, for example, you might have like the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Wisconsin, for example. Well, there'll be local rules for the Eastern District of Wisconsin, and there'll be national rules that are the same in every district.
Mhm.
So you'll want
And
both of those.
they're not like complicated things, they're just like simple things.
If you've never seen them before, yeah, you're going to say they're complicated. But this is what I'm saying. If you feed them to the AI and you ask a simple question, you're going to get all the answers. You're going
Okay.
to get the instruction on what to do. If you like to brave it yourself and figure it out, okay, fine. I wouldn't even do that. Clayton, did you want to ask something?
Yeah, sorry, it's a little off topic, but basically I'm facing an issue where, I mean, just as a toy example, suppose that like every CPA in the country was saying every Friday we got to go up and like pluck like a chicken and jump up and down. And everybody says if you don't do this, you're going to jail, right? So I read all the titles that are relevant and I don't see any, I can't convince myself that I need to do this, right? How do I like go about proving a negative, right? I'm really talking about like I have overseas bank accounts and corporations, and people are telling me I have to file with FinCEN. You're telling me to file with
Yeah,
FinCEN, or at least that
offshore.
I better figure it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah,
But I
well,
read the titles and like I don't see how it's relevant. But like I want to ask you to kind of get my back on it, but I'm not even sure how to
yeah.
ask you because like how do you prove a negative, right? So
A
yeah,
great example would be is if I were to buy real estate in another country, I don't know the local laws. I can assume they're similar to the ones here in the States, but I'm not going to assume that they're the same. So I would talk to people that actually buy real estate in that country, and I would talk to more than one person. So in your situation, I could just tell you that FinCEN is involved when you're a US citizen in other countries and you're in banking and having corporate interests. You will have some reporting. And so I would suggest that you find a professional that just does that. Accountants typically that they can do that, but there are people that only do FinCEN reporting, and they do actually charge more than accountants. So I would confer with those people as well. Accountants really should stay in their lane and not give legal advice, although they may understand this stuff, but I would talk to somebody who just focuses on that. I don't know
yeah,
if
I
that
just
helps.
don't trust anyone to figure this stuff out for
Well,
me.
you know,
You know,
that's
it's
well, so what you can
especially
try
if
to
they're
do is
licensed. You know, it's like
I know. Well, you could take the flyer because I don't remember the number. It's like a 4-digit number. There's a flyer for FinCEN reporting, and I would feed that into the AI because now we have this tool. I wouldn't have said this last year. I would use that, and I would also go look at the regulation, not the statute. Okay, and I would feed that into the AI, and I would ask my question: what are my obligations as a U.S. citizen, et cetera? And I think you're going to get more maybe a verification of what you've been told so far.
what is the regulation versus the statute? What does that mean?
Okay, so the statute is what comes out of Congress, if
Mhm.
it's a federal law, okay? The regulation is more specific
It
and
implements it,
it would impose a duty specifically, and it's very clear. It's easier to understand the regulation, is what I'm
right?
saying.
Like the statute
And where do
creates
you find
the
that stuff?
Code of Federal
Okay,
Sorry.
Regulations.
yeah, you can look in the Code of Federal Regulations, CFR is what it's
Okay.
called. The other one is the United States Code. So the United States Code is the publication of all the statutes. So you have 50
That's what I've looked
titles.
at.
Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, I think Title 31 looked like it would apply to like the LLCs you've been setting up and not apply to overseas corps. So that was kind of interesting. That was something I wanted to
Yeah,
flag for
Title
you. But
31 recently is about the beneficial owner information, which I kind of killed that one. And some lawyers
right,
killed it this year or this last year. So it's not even, I was telling people it's not even binding on you. So you can ignore it literally.
right.
We're so afraid, you know. And I just said,
Yeah.
look, if you're afraid, pay me and I'll be your corporate counsel and I'll take the heat. And so far, no problem.
Wow.
So, I mean, the whole thing's been rendered unconstitutional anyways, which I
Right.
showed you 8 different ways that it's not even legally binding, assuming it was constitutional. So, I mean, that we're not even talking about that. I'm just saying I can just tell you from what I understand on the regulations, FinCEN does get involved if you're offshore out of the country with a corporate interest or a bank account with a personal interest. So there is some
Okay,
reports
thanks, John.
quite
I'll
ugly.
check the
That's quite
regulations
ugly.
to just double check it. The title didn't convince me, but okay.
Yeah, check the regs and please talk to somebody who does this like professionally, files reports. That's
One other thing, crypticaccounting.com is gone, and I'm wondering if
the
we have a
website is. Those
replacement.
guys are still out there in Pakistan. It's just that I don't have the link. I'm gonna
Okay,
do something different. I'll tell you guys more about it later.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Ben.
All right.
I'm blasting you an email soon.
All right. I'll look for it.
I'm just trying to get some clarity before I bury you with a bunch of information.
Yeah, look at the statute and then look at the regulation will follow the statute. It'll be the parallel tables of authority. They're all listed
I mean,
for
it
all the
should
United
be
States.
something that people can understand. I know it's sometimes it's confusing, but it should be where it should be comprehensible to people.
You know, and the IRS, what they do, the IRS attorneys wrote the regs and they don't conform to the statutes. Statutes created by Congress and regulations are not following the intent of the statute.
Even though I think I can understand things, I like to confer with people that actually do it for a living. Like they actually advise people on FinCEN rules. And or look at the IRS. The IRS enforces FinCEN rules, by the way. So I look at the IRS publications on FinCEN rules.
But those are not law. Are the regulations law and
The
the
regs are legally
publications? I
binding,
mean,
put it that way. I mean, the
I'm not
statutes
quite
are, the acts of Congress are laws. They're just codified in the
right.
statutes, right?
Mhm.
I mean, if
The
you want to
regular
talk
stuff.
like that, you have to go all the way to the public law that was actually published by Congress. That's the actual law. But yeah, it's codified so we can search it into statutes. And then the
Okay,
agency
but if the
itself,
regulations don't, I mean, if they don't seem to follow the statutes, then
well,
you
then
have
you
a
have,
choice there.
but you have a remedy, but you're going to have to bring a case in court on that. And chances are
Right.
your reg is going to be within the purview of the statute. You're not going to get that far in the regulatory framework and survive being outside the statute. There's going to be too many people watching that, you know.
Hmm.
I even wonder how the BOI garbage survived public debate. What are those guys asleep? Or I don't know.
Yes, they're
That was,
asleep, John.
yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
don't know. Okay. All right.
But you know, John, almost every
Thanks.
branch of government has another branch of government you can file a claim with, and it'll attack one agency will attack the other.
I love the IG's office for this. The Inspector
Yeah.
General's office is great for this.
There's a special, like the U.S.
Yeah.
Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration. You can use that
Correct.
to attack IRS agents. You
Yeah.
can file
In
claims.
fact, I've used the FBI before. There's actually, if you want to look at 7214, if you got to have a good case though, but an obvious one, and the FBI will come in there and
I
do the
think
job.
you've told me that.
Yeah, my first case ever in the 90s. I used it I didn't know what else to do. And I was like, well, it says to do this. And I did it. And that was the end. The guy got all his property back. They took everything from his farm.
Hmm.
They took his entire farm.
Do you
And
have to be in DC to participate in that public oversight? Like, have you ever thought about doing that, John?
to do what?
You were saying when the regulations are written that there's some public, forget the phrase you used, public oversight or public hearing or what?
Well, okay, in the Federal Register, there's rulemaking that's published and it's up for public debate. You can file comments. And so I just
So you
wonder
can just
how,
file it remotely. What have you ever done that? Why don't you do that?
no, I don't, I
I
just read it.
remember, can I just say in the COVID era, when they, in New York, for example, when they were starting to file like these stupid things in the register, they were saying that they were going to have hearings and everyone would try to go to the hearings, but they would also say, just email in your comments. And I just feel like, you know, it doesn't,
That's not probably the
Yeah,
proper way to make a
it's probably
comment.
not the right way.
no,
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
no.
because you want it,
So they can just ignore that.
you want your comments to be published in the Federal Register. then you can see them on the internet. If you just email
Yeah, I
somebody,
don't see them published on the Federal Register. They just list in the Federal Register the comment period will be here, or
But they
here's
do
the
publish.
address, or here's where to email.
Yeah, but they do publish.
So, okay, I never
Yeah.
saw the comments. I just saw the periods listed, and it would be like a 2-week period or a 3-week period. And I just feel like, you know,
That's not long
they're
enough.
just-
Usually it's-
they're- no, but they're just culling through. They don't keep what they don't want.
Yeah,
Is what I
well,
thought.
I watched the FinCEN. I mean, not the FinCEN. I read the comments from lawyers, and I thought, well, why does that even have to do with anything? A lot of
Yeah.
those comments were not even. They were wasting time.
Mhm.
All right. Well, I'm gonna let you guys go.
Okay, thank
Enjoy
you.
your weekend. Thanks for participating.
Great call.
Thank you
right.
so much.
All righty.
I left a message for you.
All right, Elaine. I'll check it out.
Okay.
Bye.
Good
Bye-bye.
night.
Good night.